record button. I'm live now here. So good afternoon. Welcome to the C4I seminar. If you haven't signed in, then please do. Among other things, as I said at previous ones, that helps us determine how many sodas and coffee cups to leave out. So it's in your interest if someone in the back can pass around the clipboard in case people haven't signed in. And because I'm up here giving a talk, I'd better take some insurance. Gravelly throats. So I am a research professor here in the department. I've been here for just about 5 years now, working with Kathy Lasky and others on Bayesian reasoning, which we've applied in various projects, including counter-IED detection. I have a small search and rescue project, but the main project that's kept me occupied for the past 3.5 years is forecasting. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the methods that we're using in forecasting, but mostly this is an overview. One of the researchers working on the project, Dr. Wei-san, gave a talk 3 weeks ago now, where it was a technical talk. He dove right into some of the cutting-edge work that we're doing in order to enable the forecasting system to scale. He solved some very naughty problems. That's naughty, difficult, not naughty, bad, in Bayesian inference as applied to a prediction market. But one of the first questions we got at the end of his talk was, wait a minute, how do you use this site again? You know, we did these in the wrong order. We need to have an overview presentation. So that's what I'm striving to do today. I've discovered an alarming tendency to go on for hours talking about this site. I get up thinking, oh, I don't really have that much to say. It's just a simple demonstration. So I've tried to start myself with slides to be a little bit scripted so that I don't just go on for hours, because you're not going to be here for that long. Yes, I was at church a couple months ago. We had a visiting priest who, after the Gospels, got up to give his sermon, which we call a homily for obscure reasons. And he began by saying, well, I see a bunch of people in the back. There's seats up front. Oh, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm not going to go on that long. So I'm hopefully not going to go on that long, and I'll be getting to a live demo, but in particular because there might be people remote, I've put a bunch of things on screen. So I apologize for the blockiness. The transmission software here compresses things pretty heavily for anyone viewing it remotely. My intent was that you would have started to read some of these questions and think about them, because there will be a quiz later. If you've been following the news recently, you've probably heard Bitcoin in the news a lot. It's a new kind of peer-to-peer currency. It's generating a lot of buzz, both excitement among the tech community and perhaps curious horror by the public media, wondering how can you possibly have a currency that's not backed by a central government. People are using it for nefarious things. People are using it for good things. Who's going to accept it? How is it going to be regulated? What's going to happen? And why does the value keep going up and down? We're not going to get into all of those, but we're running a forecasting site. This is a hot topic. It's an interesting topic because it could change the way people pay for things and do transactions, much the same way that credit cards and PayPal did. So some near-term and mid-term questions. Will there be a U.S. federal government agency that imposes regulation on Bitcoin sometime this year? You might start just thinking to yourself, what are the chances? Above 50-50? Below 50-50? Will it be accepted at an online at Amazon by the end of March? Don't know the probability offhand necessarily. You might think it's lower than the chance that there's some regulation by the end of the year, if for no other reason than that the first question runs for a whole year, the second expires in about a month. A lot of the project is about helping people to get well calibrated on those numbers. And because that's extraordinarily difficult, as a crowdsourced project, a lot of what we do is help the aggregate forecast to be well calibrated and more accurate, even if there's a lot of noise in all of our individual estimates. There's a number of ways to do that. The approach that we take underneath is called a prediction market. And the important thing to remember about a market-based approach is simply that you start with a finite number of points. We manufacture them here in the C4I Center and distribute them for free. So it's about as dodgy as Bitcoin. But you get a finite number, and you therefore have to be careful where you put your forecasts, because you can only make so many. The more forecasts you make, the more points you use. The bigger a change you make in the existing forecast, the more points you use. So you want to concentrate on things where you think you know something. Okay. Oh, that's right, touchscreen. Have it there. Next slide. Is there no next slide? All right. So I've covered a little bit of this. What is SciCast? It is a prediction market. It's focused on science and technology. What does it do? It aggregates, crowdsources, gets together all of your different estimates from professionals, from students, from, in our case, anyone, anywhere in the world over 18. And we know you're over 18 because you said so when you sign up. And it returns, for anyone caring to look, the crowd's best current forecast. Caveat emptor, you have to know a little bit about how to read the forecast. If it has only one person estimating, it's not much of a crowd, is it? All right, why are we different? And I'm not going to emphasize this very much today, but we're different in particular because we can put questions together and let you explore the relationships. And I'm going to show you a couple of questions that are linked together. And I'm basically going to have you take it on faith. That's brand new. You want to rearrange?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we should have moved the tables. And then we have some chairs behind them, and then the people who are standing out in the hall can come in. The Charles were very popular. It's on wheels. It's on wheels.
Well, they look like wheels, but they're usually locked, so they're on drags.
Okay, then if we can pull those chairs around to the back here, and then we have a few more. We have a few other chairs out in the hall we can bring in. And then the people who are standing out in the hall can come in and grab a chair.
I'll do while everyone's settling in case you didn't pick these up as you came in. Just pass cards around. SciCast is pretty easy to remember. I think this is going to run out somewhere around here, so I might ask someone to get off the back cart. Just a small handful of cards. But as we have the business cards and as you're all here, they make good bookmarks and they help remind you, hey, put it up on your monitor every couple days, every week. If you have some questions on here, you'll see that, what is the current forecast for Bitcoin or for Apple or for Amazon? Let me go take a look. And if you think that just can't possibly be right, that's when we want you to get on and correct it. If you think, oh, yeah, well, maybe it could be 1 point higher, maybe it could be 1 point lower, you probably don't need to spend your points there. The economist who invented the underlying math for this market, he often gives the advice, edit out of outrage. Right? When you get on and see this just cannot possibly be right, either these two questions are inconsistent or people haven't read the news, that's when you should edit, because that's when you've got the best chance of earning more points. All right, so the market. The first fundamental thing about being a market is you get a finite number of points to spend. Why should you bother spending them? If you move things in the right direction, you will earn more points in proportion to the surprisingness of the information that you gave us. If it's way down at 1% and you move it up to 8, right, you doubled it 3 times. That's really surprising. If it ends up resolving as true, then you're going to get, in this case, 300 points back. You only start with 1,000 on our default right now. So if you think 1%, that can't possibly be right, I'm going to move it up to 8 anyway. I could move it farther, but I've got other questions. I don't want to spend all my points on this one. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay, you move it up to 8. You've doubled it once, twice, 3 times. We have our scaling set, so every doubling, if you're right, earns you 100 points. When that resolves, you've got 300 extra points. We want you to have 300 extra points, because if you're the kind of person who can go against the crowd and be right, then we want you to have more influence. And that's how we aggregate the crowd to try to get the best weighting of everybody's forecast. We found it's very difficult to go ahead. I mean, I know Jim knows a lot about computer security, but what we found that when it comes to forecasts, knowledge is not enough. You've got to balance knowledge with good calibration, with the right timing, with a careful consideration of competing interests. So the best expert in the room may not be the best forecaster. And the best forecaster may change from day to day or week to week based on who has an information edge. Rather than try to figure that all out statistically, which, by the way, we've got a competitor team from our former project that's done really good work on that, we just give you all points to start with and let the mechanism of the market work it out for us. When you run it long enough, the people with a lot of points are those who know how to forecast on the things they know and stay away from the ones they don't. Oh, sorry. Okay. So a little bit blocky here, but a couple other forecasts for you to think about that we're going to see some answers to later on. That is to say, current estimates. Will Apple release a TV product before March 1st? That would be tonight. Will there be a lab-confirmed case of the coronavirus, MERS, identified in the United States by the 1st of June? Any epidemiologists here? All right, so you probably want to stay away from that question, but you might have a rough idea within, say, 20 points. Just sort of think about that. Okay, computer scientists in the room? All right, who's familiar with the top 500 sites? Okay, write this down. Google top 500. All right. Top500.org maintains a list. Yes, prize in the back for those who are at least willing to admit that they know the top 500 sites. Maintains a list of the top 500 supercomputers in the world and all sorts of metrics on their performance. And they do this regularly. Every 6 months, they update the list. Oak Ridge National Labs is usually somewhere in the top 3. The Chinese supercomputer, I think, recently has been vying with IBM, which is the IBM top. It's not Blue Gene anymore. Okay, I forget. For first place. And these move up and down, but because of Moore's law, and because we keep adding more and more CPUs to these giant supercomputers, the power keeps going up. Well, there's a lot of ways of measuring it. Performance-weighted means that the most powerful ones get proportionally more weight according to their score. What will be the performance-weighted gigaflops per core of all the top 500 machines? Now, you probably have no idea off the top of your head, but if you know something about processor design and the business of selling processors and the purchasing plans of, say, Oak Ridge National Labs, Sandia National Labs, and a couple foreign governments, then you can make a good estimate there. And that number, in addition to just being a geeky, cool conversation starter, is actually useful for forecasting what sorts of calculations are we going to be able to perform in 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. And if you are a Moore's law skeptic because you think we finally hit fundamental physical limits that can't be overcome by just putting a bunch of cores together, this is your chance to make a lot of points. Well, if you really have some insight there, you should probably be talking to Intel and making money, not just points. There you go. Okay, the Axion dark matter experiment, been starting up. Is it going to start collecting data by the 1st of March? If it does, will they detect dark matter axions? Did we, right, the official report has not come out yet, did the world actually exceed 0 megawatts of new nuclear capacity in 2013? How much is going to be installed in 2014? Lots of questions. We have over 200 questions now, and we're aiming to hit 1,000 by the end of May. Lots of areas. How does it work? You sign up at SciCast.org. Probably figured that part out. The points come automatically. You start making predictions, and we're going to see how to do that. You track results. Right now, the main way to track results is by watching your score on the leaderboard. Also, of course, as questions resolve, you can see which ones did I get right, which ones did I get wrong, which ones did I get right but maybe I was actually overconfident on, and which ones should I have been more confident on. And then you were in the recognition by being on the leaderboard, and occasionally we're going to do some call-outs on our blog and whatnot. Okay. Once you log in, what do you see? Forecast topics. We've got 12 broad topic areas, ranging from agriculture to transportation. You've got the leaderboard, where we show the top 10 or so. And if you were not an administrative account like me, you would see your position, the person above you, and the person below you. The question writer, and we crowdsource the questions. That's something I hope to show you, is how you can write questions as well. We've got an editorial team that helps you to write the questions. The question writer nominates a judge who can be the writer. It just should be somebody who's not going to be forecasting on the question. And finally, at the moment at least, our editorial review team is able to double-check the resolutions. But the goal is for this to grow large enough that it's going to have to be crowdsourced for the resolution of questions. So people will get badges for being judges, and their resolutions will eventually be rated. So you'll get a reputation as being a fair judge of a question, which might allow you to specialize. Maybe what you like most to do about forecasting is actually write or judge questions. That's a different skill set from being a well-calibrated forecaster. But we do have a style guide, and we push the question writers to have publicly verifiable external sources and to phrase the questions as precisely as possible. This is more difficult than it sounds. It was difficult when we were a geopolitical market, but at least then it was usually pretty clear results that anyone knew what the answer should be. Is this person going to stay leader of a foreign country or not? Is this treaty going to be signed or not? Okay, anybody who reads the news knows what the question is and what the options are. For science and technology, you often have to set performance thresholds. And if you are not an expert in the field, you could easily write a question that someone who's in one of the leading research groups says, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. We passed that threshold 6 months ago. It just hasn't come out in publications yet. So it requires even more expertise. Okay, I've alluded to a geopolitical market. Where did this start? 3 years ago, we were funded, along with some other teams, by IARPA for a geopolitical forecasting competition. Has anyone read Phil Tetlock's book, Expert Political Judgment? Okay, it's an excellent read. It's not a science and technology book, but it's got a picture of a fox and a hedgehog on it. Because after 20 years of research, he started this project after getting tenure. And asking all sorts of experts anonymously to just do thousands, actually tens of thousands of forecasts over a period of 20 years. Is Canada actually going to split into two? No, but the forecasts were very uncertain. Is the Soviet Union still going to be a cohesive unit as of 1990? Most of the forecasts said yes, turned out not to be. So, and he just went through and looked, how good are we at making forecasts? Answer, not very. Who's better? Well, in his case, no human was very good. But those who were more eclectic in their approach, the foxes, did better than those who had a dogmatic view, intended to have a very good explanation, but were overconfident and had more of a tendency to shoehorn things into their point of view. By the way, curiously, when you say that, all the Democrats think that's Republicans, and all the Republicans think that's Democrats. It was irrespective of political leaning. There were plenty on both sides. Another way of splitting it is the boomsters and the doomsters. Anyone who was dogmatic in either camp tended to do better than, worse than someone who's eclectic. Well, that spawned this competition for geopolitical forecasting. Can we actually do better than these forecasters that Tetlock studied for 20 years? In particular, can we beat an unweighted average? Because one thing Tetlock identified is that if you just averaged, you would do a whole lot better than picking the best expert in the room for the reasons I said earlier, that the most impressive expert, the one that you think is going to do the best, tends not to be good when it comes to a solid, verifiable probabilistic forecast, either because they're overconfident and they might get a number of things right, but then they get one wrong when they were really confident, and that clobbers their overall performance, or they're just not as sensitive to other information. Well, if you average, what have you done? You've made a super fox. Right? You've taken information from as broad an area as you could and integrated it. Sometimes this is played out, actually it's almost always played out in the media as, the crowd of average Joes versus those pitiful experts. And that's not the right way to think about it. If you've got 100 people in your crowd, as long as it's diverse, you would rather have experts of those 100 people than non-experts. Because at least your experts do know the topic area. You just want them to be diverse. So there's a problem here, right? If you have 100 economists, just how many schools of economics are there? And did they all come from the same background? If 100, probably diverse enough, because economists are notoriously disagreeable with each other. But you see the problem, that as you get narrow and narrow in your expertise, it's less likely that you've got a diverse crowd. And you never know where the information is coming from. Of course, you'd rather just have a bigger crowd. Diversity often trumps expertise. All right, well, we did okay. We actually beat the thresholds. The number one team, Tetlocks, they were phenomenal. They blew the doors off, but we had developed alien technology, this combinatorial prediction market. And the program manager said, we have this other program starting up where the ambition is to do science and technology forecasting, and everyone there thinks this is inherently combinatorial. The geopolitical forecasters were a little unsure about making combinations of questions and conditions. Would you move into science and technology? And by the way, would you scale up to have 10 times as many questions, 10 times as many users? Oh, okay. That's a bit of a challenge. Oh, and you can't pay them anymore. Well, we're working on that one. We were able to pay people for activity, at least probabilistically. The more active you were, the more chances you had of getting an Amazon gift card every month. This year, we haven't been able to do that. So it's, scale up by a factor of 10, and we're going to take away one of your levers for getting people to be active. But we said, yeah, we'd love to be in science and technology. For one reason, we can be more diverse. When you do geopolitics, you have to be a lot more sensitive to how is this going to appear on the front page of the Washington Post if the government is funding people to answer questions about geopolitics. For science and technology, nobody cares. That's hyperbole, but it's a lot less sensitive. So we were able to now recruit from all over the world. And if our game is crowdsourcing, that's what you want. Well, how did we do last year? Why are you even interested in using this kind of forecasting technology? In year 2, 90,000 predictions made on 109 questions that resolved. There were about 200 questions total, but 109 of them resolved during the year. We did 40%, almost 40% better on our official metric than an independently run crowd where they just averaged. So yes, we beat the unweighted average. We did it consistently for 2 years. Year 2 was the most stable run after we tuned the system, 38% better. There's a number of different ways of measuring that. How often were we better? 3/4 of the time. How much probability did we give to the correct answer on average, averaged over all days? 75% probability on the correct answer. The median, 85%. Right, so obviously the tail is pulling the average down there. 80% of the time, we were above 50% probability on the correct answer. And if you're familiar with another technical measure, the area under the ROC curve is 0.86, right? 0.5 is chance. Right? If you do less than 0.5, you should just invert all your answers, and you'll do better. 1 is perfect. And this shows that it's not just calibration, there was actually signal that we were boosting. So that's the system. Okay, this is going to look odd. That chart was originally rotated. It's just showing our cumulative gain over baseline. Imagine it's that way. The baseline unweighted average is defined to be that line, and this is just cumulatively over time. There were two ways to measure our system. We just continued to gain over baseline. Fairly constant slope. Obviously, there's noise as some questions resolve against you, some resolve for you. By the way, for probabilistic forecasting, any fans of Nate Silver here? Okay, fantastic. Right, Nate Silver is famous for the blog 538 because of his 538 electoral votes, and he's now twice on presidential elections and congressional elections done phenomenally well at predicting exactly what the margins are going to be in each election and how all the states, or all the states but one, are going to come out. And you talk to him, he said, well, I just add up the numbers. Right. Now, he's very clever about how he adds up the numbers, but he's also very clear that what you should do for forecasting is use probabilities. You want to express your uncertainty and give a forecast as, well, given the polls now and the past history of the polls, I'll give an 80% chance to an Obama victory. Well, what does that mean? That means that 1 out of 5 times you should be surprised. If you're actually right, if you're well calibrated and you're giving 80%, then if you did 100 of those forecasts at 80%, you should be wrong 20 times. If you're right on all of them, you're underconfident. Now, Silver, he wasn't the only one that was doing numerical forecasts and doing very well. And we actually had a guest speaker for the Dagger project who talked to a number of our forecasters, and he had similarly gotten 49 out of 50 states. But the probability he was giving on all the elections was somewhere around 0.85. You know, David, you nailed 49 out of 50 states with a probability of 0.85. Yeah, I know. We were underconfident. There's correlations there, and we treated them all as independent. But that was partly a strategic choice. Because if we say 0.85 and we get them all, that goes to our credit. If we actually said 0.95 and 10 of them turned out to surprise us, then this would look a lot worse. So he was trying to figure out how to balance that. Okay, SciCast has a little ecosystem. Last year, we wrote all the questions. We want to scale up. We can't do that. We need experts to help us write the questions, both just because of manpower and because of lack of expertise. It's taken us a lot longer when we have to go in and pick a threshold. It means you've got 2 hours of reading through the literature and hoping you didn't miss something to say, what are the current price performance parameters for photovoltaic cells? And is there some technology of photovoltaics that I'm overlooking here? If you go to an expert in the field, you just call them up on the phone and ask them, and they think for 5 minutes, okay, well, there's this, that, the other thing. Yeah, let me get back to you. In half an hour, they get back to you, and they say, I think this should be your threshold. Now, finding the experts is difficult, but we have a collaborative question writing system called Spark. I'll show you that briefly. You can actually revise people's questions, comment on them, solicit suggestions. It goes through an editorial process. We're gathering topic leaders from the AAAS, from IEEE, people willing to say, yes, I will review questions for you in photovoltaics. I will review questions for you in business of science and technology. When they're approved, somebody who has that authority, they get a big red button on their screen that says publish. It goes live, and then you as a forecaster can see it and start making forecasts. And then the data mark down here is for interested researchers. We collect all the forecasts, all of the information that people make available to us about their background if they choose to answer a survey. This goes out and is stored anonymously so that you can do research on how is the market doing, how well calibrated is it, does age matter, does gender matter, are there some patterns about do certain kinds of questions get answered better in certain regions of the world. So that's available for research. What does a question look like? Well, rather than have you read this, we'll go and look at some questions pretty soon. You've got us as the management team. You've got topic leaders. We talked about we tend to want those to be senior people in the field, but someone who's a graduate student, somebody who's really enthusiastic about editing questions and has some contacts. They know how to get to the sources in their field, can be a good topic leader. And then question contributors, which really can be anyone. You don't get points for this, at least not in the same way. We do have some shiny badges that we'll put on your website, but you can find an area that you know a lot about in Wikipedia style, help people to make better questions for forecasting. Maybe this doesn't interest you, but there are people out there who have questions that they want forecasts on. We'd love to get venture capitalists to write questions for us and pay to put them on the site, and this could be self-sustaining. Okay, so a demo. We're going to quickly look at Spark and then get on to the forecasting site. So I was told I press Window Import. And I select a window. All right, similar looking site. You log in. Okay, you get a picture of yourself if you've logged in before, but we're going to skip that and go straight to the challenges. You saw the 12 topic areas that we had on the forecasting site, and those are mirrored roughly in the challenge areas on Spark. There's a bit of a delay in getting this generated up onto the screen there. Well, I'll put up my secret Post-it notes of which examples to look at first. Okay, so you come to the site, and you're interested in what questions are out there. Well, let's go into Business of Science and Technology. There is a category cryptocurrency, which is what Bitcoin is. And you'll see a number of questions there that are already in the process of being edited. In fact, we have several scholars at the Mercatus Center, which is in the Arlington campus of George Mason University, who are intensely interested in Bitcoin and the regulatory challenges that it poses. And they want to have questions live so they can get improved forecasts on what people think is likely to happen. So we have 4 live questions, and I think it's about a dozen now, questions in the process, such as, will the IRS issue guidance on the tax treatment of Bitcoin? Or, since this is a technical crowd, will the hash rate of the Bitcoin blockchain exceed 100 million gigahashes per second by December 31st? Again, I apologize for the rendering delay here. But what I want to show is there's a little bit of thought that goes in, because it gets back to the question from the back earlier. How do you resolve these things? And the authors have to be pretty careful. So first of all, the question should be multiple choice, yes, no, or a definite quantity. Right. So there's the title, a short text. What are the possible answers? In this case, it's binary, yes, no. Will the hash rate exceed a well-chosen threshold? Provide some background information. Why should anybody care? All right, here's what Bitcoin is. Here's what's been going on. Here's why this measure is interesting. Any loosely defined terms? Go ahead and put them in. What exactly do you mean by a hash collision? If you don't want to define it here, give us a website that contains the accepted definition. When will it be known? Every question has to have an expiration date. An event that will happen by this time, or a quantity that will be measured by this time. A threshold can be exceeded at any point prior to that, but if not, then the question closes and the answer is no. It's a prediction market. We have to be able to resolve the question so we know whether to give you extra points for helping us by improving our forecast, or to charge you a portion of the points that you originally spent to make the forecast. So we might, if it were economics, we might like to say, will the economy improve? But you can't, because we don't know how to resolve that. So you resort to measures like the GDP. You might say, well, the GDP is not the economy. Okay. What other measure? Maybe you have 5 or 6 measures you want, and you could use those to get an average sense of the economy. Well, all right, put 5 or 6 questions out there, and then construct an average as a question. Link them up. The combinatorial market, you can link questions together. And then someone who wants to forecast on the average state of the economy, defined as the numerical average of these other indicators, can do so. And someone who wants to focus on the GDP can do so. All right, how will it resolve? Which sources are you going to use as your official information? What are you going to do when those sources fail? What sort of dispute procedure do you have available? And then some metadata, topic categories so people can find it, search tags, things like that. All right, it goes through the revision process, which, because this is slow to render, I'm not going to go through, but it does full revision tracking. So if you want to change the text of the question, feel free to do so. It keeps a list of the revisions so you can see what earlier versions were. What tends to happen, by the way, is the question starts out really verbose, and people keep chopping it down as you go, layer by layer. Wait, we can actually say that in fewer words and be more precise at the same time, and you get a nice crisp question out of the end of it. All right. Actually, given the slowness, let me rely on back to the main Mystic display. How do I do that? Okay, stop import. That's how I do that. Next slide. All right. Let's look at a couple questions that have actually resolved recently. Chinese lunar mission, which I probably can't pronounce quite correctly, but Chang'e 3. Will it touch down successfully in the Moon's Bay of Rainbows? We put the question live when it launched. It was going to be en route for about a week. China was actually not releasing when they intended. There was a great analysis site run by some NASA employees attempting to say, well, all right, if this were our mission and this were the launch trajectory, what would we be planning for a landing? So that was a lot of fun. We probably should have had a question on when exactly will they land. Will it touch down successfully in the Bay of Rainbows? It was only live for a week or so. People gave it good chances. It resolved yes. So this was a question we did well on. I think actually they were overconfident, but I have no way to prove that. Just the base rate of successful lunar landings is not 80%. Will the lunar rover deploy successfully? This is an example of a linked question. You could edit this directly, or you could edit the conditional probability. If there's a successful soft landing, what's the chance that the rover will deploy successfully, which almost has to be higher than if there's not a successful soft landing. By the way, it is possible to deploy the rover if you don't meet the criteria of a soft landing, as long as it's still a halfway decent landing. But it's a lot lower probability. So what happened here is some people went in and actually edited the conditional probabilities, and the result was that the average probability was lowered, and then someone went in and corrected it. So you know what, I think the average should just be higher anyway. Okay. Well, that would have adjusted, because it's linked, that edit would then have adjusted the chance of a successful landing. Somebody thought the lunar rover is going to deploy, and the chance of that is higher when there's a successful landing, it has to raise the chance of a successful landing. All right, so there's one we did well on. All right, another one we got right. Will the percentage share of total internet traffic from mobile phones exceed 18% for the year 2013? It's not a number I happened to know much about. People thought no. They were right. It's a short-term forecast, so there wasn't a whole lot of prescience here, but at least people were paying attention to the proper news. We have a number of short-term questions on because we need to keep interest up. We need to keep tracking how accurate we're doing, how accurate we're being, so that we can see if we're improving or declining over time. And we need to give you feedback and an incentive to play. If our only questions out there are, are we going to have nuclear fusion commercially available by 2050? You make a forecast, and you come back in 10 years. It's really hard to keep the program funded doing that. So we had a bunch of, NOAA publishes a lot of data. We had some linked weather questions. And here's one where people really had no idea early on. A couple people started getting an idea, and it just slowly moved up towards the correct answer. Weather is notoriously fickle, but this was an average. Conceivably, if we had any modelers on there, they could have gotten to that answer faster. Nothing wrong with using a computer model to improve your forecast. Okay, this was a fun one and personally frustrating because I kept going out trying to observe the thing, and this is during the snowstorm cycle. I almost never had a clear night. I probably can't see it from my backyard with the scope I have just because of the combination of aperture and light. But there was a supernova early in this year that hopefully you caught some news of. If not, congratulations. It was really exciting. We had one of the best and brightest supernovas in 20 years just a few weeks ago. Well, as soon as it happened, we put the question live, when is the peak luminosity going to be? This is well defined for supernovas. They have a curve where the brightness goes up and then it declines. So we thought we had that one nailed. Is it going to be before the 1st of February, the first 3 days, the 4th to the 7th, the 7th, and whatnot? So you can see how people are jostling around which one's going to be the highest for a while. They finally settle on probably the 1st of February, but maybe before the 1st of February. So this ended up being about a 60-30 mix, and the rest of the probability taken up in the tail. Did I mention it's hard to write a question that has a clear, crisp resolution? Okay, help me out here. That's the 1st of February. Not only that, but there were so many observations that there's a whole lot of noise. All right, this is luminosity. Brighter is higher up. So the peak is somewhere right around here, depending on exactly how you average these numbers. And we had to stare at that for a while. At the time, Sky and Telescope was, they had declared that the peak had passed on the 29th of January. We were trying to figure out how to resolve this. We said, we're going to think about it over the weekend. We were leaning towards saying, yes, it is the 1st of February. The peak seems to have just crossed that date. And certainly it stayed high for a while, depending on exactly which band you used. Fortunately, as we were getting set to make that call anyway, one of the astronomy magazine sites revised their article and said, actually, the brightness appears to have been brightest early in February. So, oh, phew, we can use one of our published sources. It got worse than that. If you use infrared, then the peak definitely happened in January, and we hadn't specified. It's peak luminosity. Oh, well, we hadn't thought someone might be separating the bands out because we weren't astronomers. So that was another... Well, anyway, it gets messy, resolving forecasting questions. So you try to be as crisp as possible. Tesla Motors, will they complete their U.S. coast-to-coast configuration of supercharging stations so you can drive your Tesla vehicle across the country? Let's see. This was before the end of January, February, March, and then April or beyond. Most people were really pessimistic. This is the April or beyond curve. It was dominant for most of the time. One of our top 2 forecasters just kept looking at the station. He said, there's only 2 gaps. They've been putting a station online once every 3 weeks on average. All they have to do is close Pennsylvania and New Mexico, and he just kept making little adjustments, raise the probability a little, raise it a little, raise it a little. Well, when the question resolved in his favor, yes, they completed it in January, he shot up to the top of the leaderboard from about 1,000 to 3,000 points. He had just repeatedly made small corrections back when he had the leverage. The rest of the crowd was saying no. Why? Because this was a business forecast. Of course they're being overly optimistic. You never make your targets, right? Hal 9000, true to his name, just calculated the numbers. He is actually a real person, not a bot. I've met him. Okay. Fusion, always 25 years out, right? What do you think? When will a fusion laboratory officially confirm that they've had net positive energy output? The chances here are, by April to August, August to December, and not before the end of the year. So, votes for by April. Obviously, I'm not letting you use probabilities here, but votes for April to August, August to December, after December. This does not add up to the sum total of people in the room. Okay. No one's clear at all. Okay. I've grown up knowing that fusion is always 25 years out, right? For any value of n for current time, fusion is always 25 years away. I would have said, yeah, not before. Fortunately, I wasn't forecasting this one. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories published 2 weeks ago the results of their experiment, first ever net positive energy fusion reaction. More energy was released from the reaction than it took to contain it, the fuel, in the first place. Why was this question up there is really interesting collaboration that we have with a data mining future scanning team. Another IARPA-funded project called FUSE. They're just mining through the academic literature, the gray literature, to look for emerging topics. Now, whether it came out of their machine learning or just because the editors on that project who are familiar with this knew about it, they knew there was rumor of a result from Lawrence Livermore that might get published and pass peer review. I don't know how much they knew, but somehow they figured out that something was likely to be in the literature, so the forecast question went up. So the victory there was not our forecasters. They all got it wrong. The victory there was a machine-aided system actually identifying there's something worth forecasting here. And this is an area we're just starting to explore, is how can you combine an automated system which can scan lots of stuff very quickly and then put salient questions in front of experts. Okay. Well, we could look at a couple more of these. So those were actually all resolved. I'll throw up a couple of current forecasts for you, and then I think the right thing to do is open it up to questions, which can include, can I see some forecasts from the site right now, or can we, I think we'll have to turn off the Mystic whiteboard system in order to do a live demo. The 5-second delay means I can't show you making an edit. Will Apple release a TV product? 5%. Now, frankly, that's too high, right? Because March 1st is really soon. So, hey, 3 points. You want to sign up? Just lower that a little bit. But be careful. It's a logarithmic scoring rule, so you only want to move it a tiny bit towards the extremes, because betting 1% is saying you're super confident. So if you really are, it's a chance to get lots of points right now. But you tend to, unless you're got a question resolving very soon, you want to be careful near the edges, moving it back towards the center sheet. Okay, what will be the gigaflops per core? Leading answer is currently 10 to 20, with about a 57% chance. Coronavirus, 50-50. That's actually kind of alarming. So you want to say, how many questions are there for that one? The Axion, a couple people have been watching this, and they think that it has in fact already started to collect but hasn't updated their website, but they're not completely sure. If it does, will it detect dark matter by the end? 1 in 5. That would be pretty exciting. And this one bothers me. Surely somebody ought to actually know this answer by now. It's a 2013 number. It's not like you can hide a nuclear reactor. So there's a chance that you can probably go in and get some points, because the report for that's got to be coming out pretty soon. This is pretty sad. And this is actually a question writing failure. If you're not familiar with honeybees, honeybee colony collapse has been gaining news over the last 10 years. A lot of honeybee deaths. People aren't exactly sure why. Is it pesticides? Is it fungus? Is it something else in the environment? How many colonies, or what percentage of them, are going to be lost during this winter? And the leading probability right now is higher than our highest mark. So clearly we should have had bins at the higher level for that one. There are a lot of related questions. Honeybees are important pollinators for a lot of crops: almonds, raisins, blueberries, strawberries, whatever. So we put a bunch of related questions on. These are all indicators of the state of, honeybee pollination, their effects. And when this was when SciCast was featured on a website, it happened that the random sorting, when you went to the site, showed all these blueberries, lemons, almonds. I thought this was a science and technology forecasting site. What's this obsession with fruit? 117 forecasts on this one, so that's a decent-sized crowd. All right, let me throw this over here. So anyone looking remotely on the Mystic system, sorry, you're not going to be able to track the demo. Okay. I'm going to log in on the test site so we can actually change some forecasts. That means you shouldn't necessarily believe the numbers. The test site is always a copy of some previous state, which could be a couple of weeks old. But let's say we want to go in and look at Bitcoin. Got 2 questions on Bitcoin. Will any government officially accept a digital currency for circulation in their country in 2014? Any government, worldwide. There's been a good bit of discussion on that one, because certain governments have issued different policies. They needed clarifications from the question writer. Will this count? And the clarifications come in, no, what Germany's doing doesn't count because, and they were able to cite the description. But Canada, if they implement their scheme, it would count. So given those clarifications, here's how the estimate has changed over time. The chances are rising. Interesting. And if you want to make a forecast, when you first sign up with the system, a lot of people don't like to play market games. They don't want to move points around, and we want to keep them from damaging themselves by sliding a slider all the way to 99% and spending half their points in one go. So, simple survey interface. Here's the current estimate. It's somewhere between 60 to 80%. Do you think it's more likely than that? Click very likely. I am on the test site? Yes. Okay. Submit your forecast. Thanks. Here's how you affected it. You said it was higher. We averaged it in according to our default rules. The old forecast was 65%. Your forecast moved it up 7%. Said it's a combinatorial market. Assuming that you're right, and some government does actually accept a digital currency for circulation in their country, you get to make a conditional forecast on this other question. Will there be a currency whose real money supply is valued at more than $1 billion? This is a new one, by the way. Bitcoin has been valued at more than $1 billion, though I don't know if they still are today. All right. This is new. You cannot do this on almost any other prediction market site in the world. And you can suggest to us, hey, these 2 questions, you need to add a link between them. Right? And we can put that in. Actually letting you do that on the fly is future research. But assuming that it's true, the current estimate is very likely. Well, hey, what if I assume it's false? It's only likely. I think it should be even less likely. Now let's go back. Assume that it's true. You know what? I think it should be even more likely. There you are, making survey-style forecasts. There was a question in the back.
I had a question about the time of prediction.
Time of prediction. Mm-hmm.
I have a question that will expire tomorrow.
Yes. Yep.
Might be pretty sure.
Yes.
So if I get the same number of points.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we don't discount. Right now, every incentive we can give you to be active on our site and increase more participation, get used to the site, get used to making forecasts, we want to give that to you. Later on, we might close questions before their answer is actually known. We might try to introduce discounting to encourage people either to make long-term forecasts or to not just be news junkies. But right now, we did 40% better than an unweighted average just by giving people the incentive to tell us the answers as soon as they know them. We're going to keep that up for a while. Other questions? Or particular forecasts you want to see? And what I'd like to show you is if you take a little time to learn how to manage your points, you can go to power mode. In power mode, you don't just give us your opinion and let us average it in. You set whatever you think the probability should be, and that becomes the new consensus forecast. This is how prediction markets generally work, right? That the survey layer it's a nice user interface on top of the market, because particularly experts tend to prefer to just say what they think. Don't switch to power mode lightly. You've got a lot of power, and you need to pay attention to how much is this going to cost me. All right, so you see if I move it a little, it's going to cost me 13 points, 28 points, 50 points, 75. These numbers are going up faster as I get near the edge. 180. Now if I get it from 9, I'm at 260, down to 1, nearly 700 points. You better be darn sure to move this thing all the way down to 1. You should be willing to accept a 100 to 1 bet or a 99 to 1 bet against you. So what savvy forecasters tend to do if they get into power mode is they move it a little bit at a time, see how the response is. And if you want to play power mode games, learn a little bit of, play around, look at the response function. Where do you have leverage? Right. You want to make more forecasts where you have leverage, and we want you to as well. Because if Jim and I disagree, and I see that it's up here where he thinks it should be at 80%, and I just slide it all the way down to 20% where I think, I'm out of points. Jim can move it back to 50 cheaply. Moving back, right, the big bowl, moving it back to the middle is cheap. I can't counter him anymore. If I move it a little bit, he moves it back. I can move, right, I can counter his effort a lot longer. So I'm making better use of my points, and if I really know something, I'm giving the market better information. So we want you to give us good information. If you don't like playing market games, you don't want to optimize that, that's what safe mode's for. And we think it's actually pretty cool. We've got some nice default rules in there. And one of our research projects is we think we know how to actually optimize your forecasts. If you tell us your beliefs on a number of questions, we can do the trades for you that will use them optimally to give us the best estimate in the market. So lots of fun research we'd like to do. We concentrate on the back-end side. I was trying to show the attraction of doing the forecasts, how to do them. I hope you get involved. I hope you ask us questions. I hope you write questions for us and bring other people in and get some forecasts, suggest topic areas. Any other questions in the last couple minutes? All right. Thank you all very much. That was a really inspiring lecture.